Welcome to today's lesson. The topic is land rehabilitation and reclamation, and my name is Karaoke Charles. In this topic, we shall look at a simple introduction where we shall define the terms land reclamation and differentiate it from land rehabilitation. Then we shall look at the methods of land reclamation and also the methods of land rehabilitation. Then from there we shall look at some irrigation schemes in Kenya, specifically the Mwea and the Pekera irrigation schemes. Then we shall look at land reclamation in the Netherlands as our case study, where we shall look at two projects, that's the Zuider and the Delta Plan. And then we shall finish by looking at comparison, both similarities and differences in land reclamation and in Kenya and Netherlands. Land reclamation is the process of converting wasteland into productive land. This what we are calling wasteland here is probably land in arid conditions. So the land is not productive as it is. So you can convert that land into most useful land by probably undertaking irrigation. Rehabilitation, on the other hand, is where you are restoring land to its productive use or its productive state. This is land that has been degraded by human activities like mining, open cast mining, and for that it has been rendered useless. That land can be rehabilitated from probably by filling those holes and making the land productive again. The main reasons for rehabilitating and reclaiming land is to intensify food production and also to overcome the issue of land shortage. All this being caused by ever increasing populations. And we can give a case of our country here. In 1963 at independence, we were about 7 million. We are currently about 50 million people in this country. The land has not increased even by an inch. Then you need to feed these people. How you do it? You must look for productive ways of reclaiming land and also rehabilitating the land that is there so that you can produce more food for this population. We have several methods of land reclamation. The most common one in our country is irrigation, as we shall be looking at the cases of Mwea and Pekera irrigation schemes. Now, irrigation is where you add water, especially on land that is deficient of water. It has several advantages and of course some negative effects of irrigation. One is that in the process of creating dams for for irrigation, the dams can still be used for generation of hydroelectric power, for fishing, and also for supplying of water for domestic and also industrial use, and also controlling floods, like we shall see later in the Seven Forks Dams. One main aim was to control floods. Now, we also have some negative effects of irrigation. One is that it can be a cause of death by drowning, and that happens a lot where people drown in dams. We have them also becoming breeding grounds for mosquitoes, and of course, you know, mosquitoes come with malaria, or they cause malaria. Then where we have dams breaking, they can be disastrous, and we all remember the case of the Solai Dam in Nakuru that killed numerous people and also displaced many more. Now, we have factors that determine the amount of water that is required for irrigation. Of course, it is not all methods of irrigation, or not all areas will require the same amount of water. One, of course, is climate. Where the area is dry, of course it will require more water for irrigation. Now the soils, depending on the soil water holding capacity, some soils are very porous and will not hold water, and therefore they may require more water than soils that are less porous and which have a higher water retention capacity. The type of crop, when we'll be looking at a crop like rice requires a lot of water, because most of the growing season or the period of growing, rice will grow inside water. Other crops may not require as much water. Then the size of the field, of course, the bigger the size, the more the water that is required for irrigation. We have methods of irrigation there. They are shown in a nutshell. You can see different methods. We don't need to explain this a lot. You can see water lifting, the sprinkler or the overhead irrigation. We have canals, and we also have flooding, trickling, and also drip. We will not go into the details of those methods. They are clearly seen from that slide. The other method of land rehabilitation is draining of swamps. Now we have problems that are associated with excess water. Water is life, but when it is in excess, then water becomes a problem. And the problems that come with excess water include forming breeding grounds for disease-causing vectors, mainly mosquitoes. Number 2 is that excess water causes waterlogging, and waterlogged soils are not suitable for agriculture. Then excess water causes flooding, and flooding can cause destruction of property and also loss of life. Now the processes of draining swamps, we start by digging ditches so that we can remove the excess water by gravity from the area that the swampy area. The excess water is drained using ditches. Then you can also plant trees like eucalyptus, which will use up excess water from the soils. And then you can also use perforated pipes. The perforated pipes will pick the water and then drain the water by gravity from the area, the swampy area. Now we have cases of where swamps have been drained in Kenya. We have the Yala on the lower courses of River Yala, and then we also have the Bunyala on River Zuider that was drained in 1970. The objectives of these two projects, one of course was to free the area from pests, then of course to have land for settlement and agriculture, and ease population on the canal plains while reducing flooding and associated hazards, and also to develop the remote areas. Now it managed to achieve several it had several achievements. One, of course, flooding has been controlled in the area. About 800 hectares were made available for agriculture and settlement, and then waterborne diseases were also controlled. Now, the other method of reclaiming land is control of pests. And now pests here, we are talking about mosquitoes, we are talking about rodents, birds, squirrels, and the rest, and of course flies. There are methods of controlling them. For instance, mosquitoes can be controlled by fumigating, draining of swampy, stagnant water, spraying, and also clearing of bushes. That's where mosquitoes mainly live. So you clear the bushes, that will clear off the mosquitoes as well. The rodents, birds, squirrels, and porcupines, of course, they are dangerous in terms of eating of farm crops, and you can control them by trapping, by poisoning, by hunting, scaring away, as the old saying goes. that there are many ways of killing a rat, including burning the house, which you don't try at home. Flies mainly live in bushy areas, so you can control them by clearing the bush and also spraying the bush and also sterilizing males and also creation of a buffer zone. The buffer zone here is where you clear land so that they are not able to move from the bushy areas to where people are, and also killing of the hosts. However, the problem of spraying, there are several problems that are associated with spraying, especially where you are doing indiscriminate kind of spraying. Some insecticides, for example, the DDT was banned because it was known to be extremely dangerous. And you can read a book by Rachel Carson, who was a scientist in the US who was campaigning a lot about DDT, and eventually the US government banned DDT, but it continued being used in other countries until eventually it was banned. Now the fly also develops resistance when you spray too much. Then they become resistant, and controlling them now becomes another problem. Then it will also kill other useful organisms, especially in soils where we have small microorganisms. When you do that, then you kill those important microorganisms. We look at methods of land rehabilitation. We have said earlier that land rehabilitation is where you are taking land back to its productive state. Now, afforestation is one, and also reforestation. Afforestation is a situation where you plant trees where none existed before, where reforestation is planting of trees where they have been cut down. Now, trees serve many purposes. Among them, trees control soil erosion by binding soils together. The roots, of course, bind soils together, and that reduces their vulnerability to soil erosion. Trees will also reduce surface runoff and increase the rate of infiltration. That, of course, ensures that the soil water is available when we have water infiltrate into the soil. The decaying of organic matter from trees forms humus, and we know the importance of humus. It adds to soil fertility and also improves the soil structure. Roots will also help in water to percolate into the ground. They open up the soil structures so that water is able to percolate and infiltrate into the soil. And lastly, soils will modify the climate of an area. Areas that are forested will normally have a microclimate that is characterized by higher rainfall and lower temperatures. Now we have other methods of land rehabilitation. We have bush fallowing, we have grass strips and cover crops. Most of these were discussed in the topic soil, so you can refer them back to that topic, and also those that do agriculture as a subject better understand this. Mulching is where you add dry or vegetative materials at plants to reduce evaporation of water and also to keep the soil moisture intact. The application of manure and fertilizer is another way of land rehabilitation, although organic fertilizers can, when used in excess, they can become a problem, or they can make the soils too acidic and unproductive. Controlled grazing, this can be done by paddocking to avoid overgrazing, because overgrazing will expose soils and that will expose them to soil erosion. Then we have filling of quarries and areas where open cast mining has happened. Those holes need to be filled. And we have the case of Bamburi in Mombasa. It's a living example where the quarries were filled and they created a park and that's commendable. Then use of drainage trenches to remove excess water, of course, from land. And lastly, it is planting of drought resistant crops. We shall look at 2 irrigation schemes. Of course, we have more irrigation schemes in Kenya, but for the case of this topic, we shall look at 2 main irrigation schemes, that is Mwea and also Pekera irrigation schemes. That is Mwea. It's located in Kirinyaga County, and then we have a map there showing where Mwea is in Kenya. Then we have an aerial photo of the rice paddies in Mwea. Then on the far right, at the bottom there, you can see farmers and customers buying rice in Mwea. Now this project, we have already mentioned that it is located in Kirinyaga County. It was established in 1954, and this 1954 is following the state of emergency that was declared in Kenya in 1952, and therefore most of the people, especially in Central Highlands, were put into detention camps. And when we'll be looking at the objectives next, we'll see that one main aim of this project was to utilize that detainee labor. The objectives are there. One, of course, was to reclaim the unproductive land from semi-arid conditions. Those people that know Mwea will tell you that the land there, the area is semi-arid. Then, as I had mentioned earlier, that it was also to utilize the detainee labor. You have people here that have been detained, and you need to utilize them so that they don't become lethal. You have to keep them occupied doing something. So this project was supposed to utilize these people. Then it was also supposed to settle the former detainees and the landless. Those people who were released from detention, they had nowhere to go. So this one was also supposed to settle the people. It was also supposed to create employment for the former detainees, and also to increase land for agriculture. We have said that the population is ever increasing and the land is not increasing, so we need to create more land for agriculture to feed the growing population. We look at the factors that led to the successful establishment of the Mwea irrigation scheme. The factors are normally divided into 2. We have the physical factors and the human factors. So some of the physical factors was the availability of extensive land, which of course created room for future expansion. The area was arid, as we had talked about earlier, and therefore the population was low, and therefore there was enough area for expansion. Then we have this black cotton soil, availability of black cotton soil, which favors the growth of rice, because black cotton soils have a high water retention capacity, and therefore they are suitable for growing of rice or paddy rice. Then in other areas we have loamy soils. We have loamy soils that favor other crops to be grown in this area, including tomatoes and other food crops that are grown on subsistence agriculture. They do well because of the clay loamy soils. Then the gently sloping land here allowed for water to flow by gravity, and therefore reduce the cost of having to pump water. And then it also allows for mechanization, using of tractors to till the land. Then we have availability of plenty of water from the 2 main rivers that supply water here. They are River Thiba and Nyamindi. They are permanent rivers that provide water to the scheme throughout the year. And then the climate of this area is characterized by warm weather, especially in the second half of the year. This allows the rice that has matured to dry, and therefore ready for harvesting. The human factors One, of course, the land was uninhabited, of course, because of the arid conditions, and therefore there was no much displacement of people. Availability of labor from former detainees, we have talked about this. The free labor was availed by the detainees. Then the colonial government needed to occupy these people. I had talked about this earlier. There was need to keep the detainees occupied, and therefore this project came in handy to ensure that the detainees remained occupied. Then the location of this project, or the location of this area, those that know where Mwea is, it is just along on your way to the Nyeri, Nairobi Nyeri highway. You branch at Makutano. Mwea is just ahead there. Now this area is surrounded by places that major urban areas, and which provide the market that is needed. We have Nairobi, we have Embu, we have Nyeri, we have Kerogoya. All these are major urban centers in Kenya with high populations to support or to supply the market for rice. Other than the rice, of course, the rice is the major commodity, or the major crop that is grown here. We have Pishori rice, very valuable, although again a little expensive. Then we have Sindano. Sindano is more resistant to diseases, and therefore it is also preferred in this area. Then we also have some other subsistence crops. We have maize, we have peas, we have beans, which are grown on small scale here. Remember, the people also need to be fed, the people that live there. So they grow maize and peas and the other products. Then horticultural crops like tomatoes and French beans and watermelons are also grown here. When we come to the organization of the scheme is divided into Mwea, Thiba, Wamumu, and the Tebere sections. 6,000 hectares are under rice cultivation. The people here live in 36 small villages. So each farmer is a tenant. They have 4 acres of land, and where out of that 1/8 of an acre for the nursery, where they grow the rice before transplanting it into the main field. Then the paddies are divided into 1 acre, which is surrounded by banks of earth. I think we saw that in where you put the paddy, so that you prevent the water from flowing out. So you will put water inside that paddy, which is fenced by these earth banks, where you will flood the paddy and grow rice inside the paddy. This place has 17 primary schools. So these are some of the benefits that have come with this project. We have 17 primary schools. We have more than 5 secondary schools. We have one for the less able, or abled differently, and a mission hospital known as Karira in this region. The benefits of this scheme: the scheme has had numerous benefits to the people and also to our country. One thing is that, of course, it saves us a lot of foreign exchange that could be used to import rice. So it supplements the rice that we import from elsewhere. The farmers, of course, earn an income, and that, of course, raises their standards of living. And learners or students, candidates should always remember to mention that anywhere there is earning income or employment, that the point there should be raising people's living standards. Because if somebody is employed and they do not improve their living standards, then that is not employment, it's rather slavery. Then it provided land to thousands of landless. We talked about the detainees who are landless, and after they were released, they needed the land. The reservoirs that have been created have helped in controlling floods. The excess water from these two rivers could be flooding this area, but because it is utilized in this rice cultivation, then it reduces flooding in this area. Improvement of roads to transport rice from the fields. This is an area that has roads have been developed, of course, so the roads of course benefit the people. Then social amenities, we have talked about 17 primary schools, we have talked about hospital, we have talked about secondary schools. Of course, that again has improved people's living standards. They are able to access social amenities, all because of this project. However, the project of course comes with problems, or it's faced with several problems that we shall discuss here. The stagnant water, of course, forms breeding grounds for mosquitoes and snails. The snails cause bilharzia, and this is an area that is characterized by high levels of malaria. Remember, malaria is a leading killer disease in Africa. It's the leading, actually. As a solution to this, of course, the use of pesticides to control the mosquitoes, and a simple procedure of sleeping under a net will control malaria. Shortage of water, of course, because of drought. We are in a country that is being faced by serious problems as far as drought is concerned. And the other problem, other than drought, we also have what we call juakari farms. These are farms, private farms, that are not part of the scheme, but they divert waters from the rivers before the water reaches the scheme, and that causes shortage of water in the scheme. The solution is building reservoirs. I think there's a dam that is being built, launched recently in that area, and also charging farmers to aid in water distribution so that it becomes more effective, and of course to control these juakari farms that we are talking about. Pests, again, students are reminded that when you talk about pests in geography, give a relevant example, and that's why I've listed several pests that specifically attack rice. They are there. Of course, controlling pests, we looked at how to control pests. Birds can be scared using explosives. There's a video I normally show my students on how they do it in Tanzania. They use petrol bombs to control these pests. You can watch it. It should be there on YouTube. It's called Planet Earth. Go to grasslands and you'll see the video there. Diseases, again, always give a relevant example. We have the rice grass-resistant virus. The only way to control diseases, of course, is doing more research to come up with more resistant varieties of these plants. The other problem, of course, is inadequate capital. We are a developing country, and capital is always a problem. We need farm inputs, we need fertilizers, we need all manner of farm inputs, and money is always a problem. The solution, of course, here is to empower cooperatives, build more cooperatives. These cooperatives are meant to extend loan facilities to farmers so as to enable them to afford the farm inputs that are required. The other one is shortage of labor, especially during the planting and the harvesting period. Everybody is in this business, so getting people to work in your farm becomes a problem. The labor is also as a result of the rural urban migration. Everybody is out looking for greener pastures in bigger cities like Nairobi. So getting the people to work in the farms becomes a problem. Now, the solution that is suggested here is marketing by NCPB. NCPB is the National Cereals and Produce Board. When they market and the farmers are able to earn better, then they will have the power, or the power, yes, to hire labor. Then siltation and growth of weeds in the canals. Of course, when we have siltation and the growing of weeds, that reduces the amount of water that is available for the farms. Then the solution here is stopping cultivation on the riverbanks. We have laws in this country, and cultivating along riverbanks is not allowed. But when it comes to implementation, there's a problem. So that should be enforced, so that when you cultivate along the riverbanks, and then when the river is in flood, that is what will take the silt into the canals. And of course, you can control the weeds, of course, by plucking them, or any other method, spraying or any other method. Then we have inadequate health centers. These health centers, when they are inadequate, then people have to travel to far areas to seek for medication. That reduces the man hours. Those hours they are using to travel to hospitals could have been used in working in the farms. And there should be, as a solution, then we can construct more health centers. And the good thing is that is the health care in this country is devolved. So the government better understands that, the local government, the county government, and can therefore do. Another problem is undeveloped access roads, which makes delivery of rice to be an expense, where you are required to use a lot of money to deliver your product to the market. And the solution, of course, is to build roads, build new roads, and improve the available ones. Our next irrigation scheme is the Pekera irrigation scheme. It is located in Baringo County. You can see the coat of arms for Baringo County there. The location of Baringo in the map of Kenya, you can see it there. And we can also see the president visiting this scheme sometime before he became the president. Then you can there is a label of the Kenya Seed Company, which controls or is responsible for this scheme. It is the one that manages the scheme. The background to this Pekera irrigation scheme, we have mentioned that it is located in Baringo County, and specifically in Margat sub-county. Established almost the same time with the Mwea irrigation scheme, that is in 1954. The gazetted area was 5,800 acres of land, but the one that was under irrigation was 3,000 acres. The water here comes mainly from River Pekera. The main crop here is the maize seed that is grown by the Kenya Seed Company. That's the main crop. However, we have other crops. We have pawpaws, we have watermelons, we have onions, vegetables, green grams, beans, cowpeas, and sorghum are also grown here. The objectives are almost similar to those of Mwea irrigation scheme. One, of course, was to utilize detainee labor. It's the same period, 1954, following the 1952 state of emergency that was declared by the colonial government. Then, of course, was to develop land for agriculture. Again, Baringo is a fairly dry area, and therefore needed the irrigation. The irrigation scheme was necessary. Then, of course, to settle the pastoralists as farmers. Pastoralism and the associated problems of pastoralism needed to be solved by settling these people so that we would control the issues of cattle rustling. Then, of course, it was supposed to control the seasonal flooding of River Pekera by using up the excess water and from the river. Now, the factors that favored the establishment of this scheme, again, we divide them into physical and also human. Physical factors include a gently sloping area or gently sloping land. Of course, it was supposed to allow water to flow by gravity and reduce the cost of pumping, and it also allows for mechanization. Then deep and well drained loamy soils, which allow growth of a variety of crops. You have seen a large variety of crops are grown in this area. Then we have the semi-arid conditions that we have talked about, that Baringo is relatively semi-arid, and that necessitated the need for that irrigation scheme. Then we have extensive area of land that is of course for expansion and to do this business in large scale. Then the constant supply of water from River Pekera also served that purpose. Now from there we look at a few case studies, or case study of land reclamation in the Netherlands, and then we shall compare it with the land rehabilitation in Kenya. So that is the location of Netherlands. It is in southwest of Europe, in the northwest, sorry, as a flag and the royal coat of arms for that country. We have mentioned that it is located in the northwest Europe. The country is half of the country lies below sea level, and that is what necessitated these two projects that we shall be discussing in this area. The land is relatively flat and characterized by coastal lowlands, and a major part of the Netherlands is land that has been reclaimed from the North Sea. The two projects here, we have one known as the Zuider project. The main thing in Holland, the main reclamation, is land being reclaimed from the sea. Unlike in our case, where land is being reclaimed from arid conditions, in Netherlands it was mainly reclamation from the sea. Now, this project is located in the north of the country, or in north of Holland. Began in 1927 to 1932. You can see we are relatively behind. Our projects were in 1954. As far as 1927, these people are reclaiming land from the sea. The main aim, of course, was just like in our case, increase food production and also control flooding. Noting that the country is below sea level, flooding was a serious problem. The project involved creation of 4 polders. Polders are land that is reclaimed from the sea, and it is surrounded by dikes to reduce or to prevent the seawater from getting into land. Then it also involved creation of a lake by damming a river. The river Igisel, I don't know whether that's the correct pronunciation, but the river was dammed in estuaries to create a lake, a freshwater lake, that is. Now, the stages in reclamation of land here. One, of course, is creating dikes. The dikes are constructed to reduce water getting into land, especially during the high tide. Then canals were also constructed to drain the excess water. from the reclaimed area, the area that has been surrounded by dikes. You need to remove the seawater from that polder. So they used ring canals to drain the water. The remaining water was pumped using pumps. Then reeds, papyrus, were grown inside this reclaimed area, of course, to use up the excess water. Now, once the water on the surface is now removed, they needed to deal with the water table, which of course again was contaminated with the salty waters of the sea. So they used pipes, laid them in ditches, and that is what was used to drain water from the water table. Then the soil, of course, was treated with chemicals to lower salinity. This is soil that was under the sea, and we all know seas are salty, so it needed to be cleansed of the excess salinity. So it was drained. After the treatment, then the drained land was flushed with fresh water to remove the remaining salt, and then of course the land was now available and for agriculture. The project came with several benefits. It increased arable land by 10%. Freshwater lakes that were created. We have talked about one lake that was created, of course, which will provide water for domestic use and also for industrial use. Then it ensured better drainage for the reclaimed areas, reduced the risk of flooding. The dikes, of course, reduced water from coming into land, and then of course shortened road connection between the provinces of North Holland and Friesland. The land is now we have land now, we don't have the sea, and therefore it created land for road transport between the two provinces. The other project is what we call the Delta Plan project. The Delta Plan project involved mainly closing of estuaries. An estuary, we are geography, those who are geography students know what an estuary is, but just to remind them, an estuary is where the sea water projects into land. So what the project was about is closing that estuary so that you separate the sea water and create an inland water body, and then create freshwater bodies on land. Now, this area, the Delta Plan project, is in the southwest of the country. The benefits came with controlled pollution and the salinization of inland water. The inland water was being polluted by the sea water, which is salty. So with now controlling this, or blocking the sea water from coming on land or interfering with the inland water bodies, then it made sure that salinization of inland water bodies was controlled. Then improvement of soil, which again increased land for agriculture. And there was also creation of lakes for recreational purposes. And then the creation of freshwater reservoirs, which are used for irrigation, domestic, and also for industrial purposes. Now, if we compare Kenya and Netherlands in terms of land reclamation, we will look at similarities and also differences between the two areas. One of the similarities is that reclaimed land in both countries is located in low-lying areas. We have looked at Kenya, the low-lying areas of Mwea, and we have other projects like land reclamation in Ahero. It's also a low-lying area. Then of course in Netherlands we have said relatively the land, the entire country is almost flat and low-lying, actually below sea level. In both countries we have dikes which control water from entering reclaimed land. In our country we create dikes on rivers to prevent flooding. Here the dikes were created on the sea to control seawater from getting on land. But either way, dikes have been used in both countries. In both countries, again, flooding was a common problem, and of course, because of low-lying position of Netherlands, our country is also, we also have the issue of flooding. It's a common problem up to date. Then drainage ditches and canals were used in both countries. In Kenya, of course, it was to drain swamps. In Netherlands was to drain excess water or water from land in the reclaimed polders. Then scientific methods are used in both countries. The use of fertilizers to improve soil fertility. We have seen Netherlands using chemicals to flush or to reduce salinity in soils. Then the government was involved in both countries. The government of Kenya, at the time of the colonial government, was responsible for the projects. In Netherlands, we have seen it's also the government that was responsible for creating this. Then in both countries, dikes have broken down and caused destruction of property and even loss of life. Then the intention in both countries, of course, was to increase land for settlement and also agriculture, while also controlling flooding. Now, just to remind our students that you are comparing two countries, Kenya and the Netherlands, and the same should be remembered in all the case studies. So when you are talking about similarities, and because you are comparing two countries, you must tell us what is in both countries. If you look at all our points here, you have seen us repeating in both countries, because it's a comparison between two countries. So always remember that. Now the differences again here, remember to tell us what is in Kenya and what is in the Netherlands. It's still a comparison. So the differences here, we have canals, dams and dikes were used to reclaim land in the Netherlands. In Kenya we mainly used ditches to drain water from swamps, and mainly the main thing here is irrigation and also clearing of bushes to control flies. In Netherlands, land was reclaimed from the sea. In Kenya, reclamation is mainly from swampy conditions and also arid lands. In all our cases that we have looked at, it's either the Bunyala is draining of a swamp, the clearing of bushes to control flies, and now mainly irrigation in arid areas. Netherlands has only two projects. Kenya has more. We have talked about the Bunyala, we have talked about Moya, we have a Hero irrigation scheme, we have the new ones, Galana Kulalu. All these are irrigation projects in Kenya, many of them. Then in the Netherlands it was on large scale. We have said a better part of the country is land that is reclaimed from the sea. In Kenya it's on small scale, it's just small scale projects. Then in the Netherlands, Netherlands of course employed advanced technology. They have the technology. Reclaiming land from the sea is not that simple, and we have looked at the process, and you can clearly tell that it was a tedious job. In Kenya, of course, the process involved simple things like clearing of bushes, irrigation, planting trees. Those are simple projects. Finally, in the Netherlands, dikes are constructed to prevent seawater from entering land. We have talked about that. In Kenya, the dikes are mainly to prevent river water from flooding the surrounding lands. So those are the differences. That marks the end of our topic, land reclamation and rehabilitation. We shall be linking up in the next topic. Please keep watching. The next topic in Form 4 shall be fishing. that will be coming to you shortly. Please like my page and follow for more educative clips and videos. Thank you for your time.